everyone to this research roundtable on innovation and the CTSA's Innovation Hub, which is led by Dr. Wilbur Lam and Morgan Greenleaf. And they're going to tell us about this structure in the CTSA. I just wanted to remind everyone that innovation is one of our values in the School of Nursing, and it's also one of our strategic initiatives. We have a number of innovation working groups that center around computational health, development of technology and healthcare apps, innovative and transformative clinical practice, data science, and simulation. So each of these areas of innovation cuts across teaching, research, and clinical practice. And so the exciting thing is the university is developing a number of resources around innovation, including the Hatchery, which many of you may have heard more about, that's just opened, and it's focused on design thinking and will focus on students. And then there's an innovation hub in the School of Medicine that's focusing a lot on diagnostics, if I have that correct. And then we have this innovation catalyst in the CTSA, which cuts across multiple areas. Dr. Wilbur Lam is here to talk with us today. He's a professor in the Department of Pediatrics and the Division of Pediatric Hematology and Oncology, and also faculty in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at Emory and Georgia Tech. And he's also the Chief Innovation Officer of Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Georgia Tech Pediatric Technology Center. He's a PI of the Atlanta Center for Microsystems Engineered Point of Care Technology, and we'll hear more about that, the point of care options today for Emory and Georgia Tech. And he's the director of the Innovation Catalyst within the CTSA, so he holds many hats. He's also an active researcher. His research involves developing and applying nanosystems and microfluidic technologies to advance biomedical work with and the specific focus is on cellular biophysics of hematology and oncology processes. And for his ongoing work in COVID-19 testing and verification, Dr. Lam is the 2021 Healthcare Heroes Award recipient in the Healthcare Innovation Researcher category. So congratulations, Dr. Lam, and we look forward to hearing your ideas. We also have with us Morgan Greenleaf, and Morgan is the Technical Program Director of the Innovation Catalyst and App Hatchery within the CTSA, and he brings human-centered design and lean software development practice to the development of novel mobile applications. And this comes from his background in industry and product development. So I know many of you are interested in developing apps, developing different systems and innovations. So this is going to be a wonderful resource for us. So thank you so much, Wilbur and Morgan. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sandra. That's a great introduction. Thank you so much. So yeah, I have Morgan with me. I would also like to introduce Maren Parcell, who also works with us within Innovation Catalyst. So like you said, Sandra, there's many innovation initiatives that are going on at Emory at the entire enterprise level. So we represent the Innovation Catalyst, which is part of the Georgia CTSA, which comprises of Emory as well as other institutions like Georgia Tech, Morehouse, and UGA, as well as Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. So, one thing Morgan and I wanted to talk to you all about is, since this is kind of a roundtable, thank you again, Dr. Dunbar, for the invitation. And I see that there's only about 22 people on. We could actually make this a little bit more interactive. Morgan and I could talk about what we and Maren do within Innovation Catalyst, the several initiatives we have. We could also give some examples of things that we're doing. A lot of what seems to be in demand, as you alluded to yourself, Sandra, is mobile apps for biomedical applications, especially relatively, simple apps, which is kind of the niche that we found is really important for our faculty within Emory University. So I wanted to kind of have this be an ongoing discussion. So we could, I could obviously talk about my own adventures in innovation for about 20 minutes, but wanted everyone's thoughts on that. It seems like there's few enough people that we could certainly entertain all opinions. One way we could do it is I could talk about my story, what I've done, and then what we're doing in Innovation Catalyst, or we could just jump right in and talk about what we're doing in Innovation Catalyst and have the second half of this hour just be more interactive, and we could even talk to you guys about some ideas or questions that you might have. So what might be useful? Anybody? Dr. Dunbar and anyone else?
Yeah, I think knowing what things people could come to you for is going to be helpful. So we have people who are developing some apps. There's a couple who are not on here. There are people interested in apps. And then also thinking beyond apps. What are the other sort of areas of innovation that people could come to the CTSA for or partner with you?
Got it. So Morgan, why don't we, if you're okay with it, Morgan, why don't we just talk a little bit about the activities and initiatives we have within the Innovation Catalyst, really dive a little bit deeper in terms of especially the app stuff, but as well as some of the other programs. And, if there's time and if there's interest, we could certainly talk about, for example, my own kind of adventures in the space that kind of touches on all the different aspects of Innovation Catalyst. But yeah, we can just go ahead and get started.
That sounds great.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. So thank you. So myself and Morgan are from the Innovation Catalyst. If you could go to the next slide. And what we'll do is, and again, we're, I think, a small enough group that feel free to interrupt, or, myself and Morgan and Maren will be checking the chats, and we'll stop at any moment if you guys have any questions. But I think the big overarching question that you might have is, okay, what does Innovation Catalyst do? And in fact, there's a lot of things with the word innovation that seem to be popping up within our university. In fact, as Dr. Dunbar had mentioned, there's the Innovation Catalyst. There's also the Innovation Hub, which is more centric within Emory Healthcare. And actually, Maren is part of that initiative. So what we in Innovation Catalyst do, our mission is what you see here on the screen. Our goal is to try and to accelerate clinical translation, because we are part of the CTSA, of novel health technologies by educating and providing in CTSA investigators, of which you all are part of, with entrepreneurship and commercialization resources. So we're trying to enable any of you who are interested in entering this space. Next slide. So who are we? There's myself, and as Dr. Dunbar gave an excellent introduction, probably don't need to say anything else about me. Morgan is the director of Innovation Catalyst, and we're also enabled by another few members of our team. So Maren Parcell, who actually has part of her position is within Emory Healthcare, is really interested and has expertise in design strategy. Rob Menino is the technical operations, and he is based at Emory as well as Georgia Tech. And he has a lot of experience with getting medical apps into the user's hands and commercialization. In fact, he and I founded one of our startup companies that really blossomed out of my own laboratory. And then we have others who help us quite a bit as well. Santiago Argonada, who is one of our lead developers, who again helps with our mobile app initiative that we'll talk about in a bit. And then we have representatives from the other CTSA institutions. So Manuel Kingsley representing Georgia Tech, Tim Martin from UGA, and Dr. Vincent Bond over at Morehouse. So that's us within the Innovation Catalyst, within the Georgia CTSA. So we have several initiatives, and we kind of group them into two broad categories. One is what we call operating initiatives, and these are things that we do to kind of help you all. You know, what are services that we can provide for any of you who are interested in the quote unquote innovation game? And then we also fund things. So via the CTSA, we're also a funding mechanism. So we fund things like talks, bench to market talks that are for education about aspects related to innovation. We also fund the Kauffman Fast Track, which is a national program. Those of you, there might be some of you that have already taken this course. It's basically a crash course, several day crash course in entrepreneurship that's geared towards the learners of all stages that really span the gamut from students to postdocs to faculty and trainees. So really anyone within School of Nursing would be eligible to enroll in the Kauffman Fast Track course, and that's offered once a year. Our residency track, we are interested in enabling medical trainees, and honestly, we could extend this into School of Nursing as well. We're always interested in extending these programs, you know, beyond what we currently have. So right now, it's a residency track for in medical school. So people who have gotten their MDs and are training in residency, who are interested in learning aspects about innovation, integrating that as part of their training and education. We also, as we alluded to before, have a strong link with Georgia Tech, and we fund actually the undergraduate design course, which is called the Capstone Design Course. And then a class that I'm involved with myself, which is which we call Health Reach, in which Georgia Tech undergrads create STEM activities for our patients, chronically ill children at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And really, again, it's this education aspect related to innovation. Okay. Next.
So I will take over here, and actually I'll go back one. And we are going to dive into the App Hatchery here specifically on these operating initiatives. And I'm going to touch on these other services here at the end. But if there's any questions on those or any of the others, we'll, feel free to unmute and ask. So what is the App Hatchery? And as Wilbur alluded to, we've found this niche about building simple mobile apps. These are apps that maybe aren't as difficult to make and are very patient focused, but these are not deep technical apps. There are other places you can go for that, lots of other services available for that kind of development. And so we're a service that supports people who have ideas for mobile apps, and we'll help guide you through the entire process, through strategy, user research, development, what's called an MVP, or a minimum viable product, clinical study. So we'll get you basically to the point where you can actually study this application. And we have an engagement model where we can just consult with you, we can just help you on your process, or in the right circumstances, we can actually do everything with you. So we can help you all along the entire train. And it starts with this intake and strategy session. So we like to have a first meeting with people to understand really the goals that they're trying to achieve with the mobile app, the goals for the patients, maybe clinical outcomes, or other types of goals. What are the users? What types of users? What do we think the needs of those users are? And really trying to understand the fit. Is the idea that you have, is it really a good fit with mobile apps? Then we'll dive into design and research, and this is where we spend a lot of time. The research is really market research, so looking at what's available out there on the market. And then we also do a lot of user research. So this is going out and talking to people and understanding what it is they're looking for in a mobile app. And then on the design side, which I'll go into later, it starts with low fidelity prototypes. So think sketches on a piece of paper. And then it increases in fidelity over time towards wireframes, clickable prototypes, and the whole idea is that you're designing incrementally over time. And then we have development, the hardest part, and we develop both for Android and iOS. And I should have mentioned before that everything that I've described here is funded by the NIH, except for one small part, which is the development. So everything here is free as a member of the CTSA, which everyone on the call is, but except for the development. And to tackle that problem, we have a number of different partnerships. So we have partnerships with students. So we have development that is free. We work with several different courses at Georgia Tech. We have some developers on staff that do development on a limited basis. And then we also have professional developers that we have a relationship with specifically at GTRI. And I'll talk a little bit more about the development later on. And then the final step here in the App Hatchery is the study itself. So we study mobile apps at Grady, at Children's, Emory, and at UGA, and we're open to other locations as well. And studying of mobile apps is its own kind of special, takes its own special skills. So we help you with that process as well. So this is the overall outline of what the App Hatchery does, and I'm gonna dive in a little bit more. Underlying everything that we do is this very classic concept of human-centered design, or sometimes called design thinking. And as I mentioned before, we really focus everything that we do on the users. And so this image, if you've never seen it before, it starts on the left about understanding what users want and understanding the needs of users. So we see often people build mobile apps, people build tools, and they think people are going to love this, but they never actually talk to the people. And so the things are not successful. People don't want to use them. So we ground everything that we do in human-centered design, in understanding. And the other thing that I want you to notice about this graph is that each of these different phases of development here, as you move from left to right, they're all iterative. So you're moving as you develop the product, as you develop the mobile app, you're iterating as you go quickly. And so you're continually changing what you're doing and continuing to understand. And as you're going through this process, you're checking back with the user, you're empathizing with that user from the very beginning of the process. And so that underlies a lot of the work that we do in the App Hatchery. I think it's useful to talk about a specific example. So we have multiple, but I'm going to talk about one, which is called Hometown. And this is a mobile app that we have developed for cancer screening compliance, which is a really technical way to say that we are aiming to help families who have children who have these rare genetic predispositions to certain rare cancers, which you can see here on the left. And so we've developed this mobile app to help those families to manage and maintain the really complex screening protocols that are required for these different kinds of cancers. There might be, 10 or 15 different screening appointments that these families have to go to within any given year. And it could be really difficult for them to manage that process. And the goal clinically is, if you can maintain these screening protocols, then you can catch and identify any issues, in particular any cancers, earlier before they become a bigger problem. And so for this app, I'm just going to whiz all the way through this. We've gone through a bunch of different steps that I'm going to step through in a little bit more detail here. We've gone through this design strategy. We've talked to users. We've developed wireframes. We've helped with the IRB submission and done the development itself. And I want to illuminate this app by going through a little bit deeper into that process. And it starts with the users. So the team interviewed parents who are managing these predispositions, and we interview them. We did this over Zoom, as you can see. And the whole goal is to gather insights about their experience. So what is it about managing their care that is a problem for them. And we're drawing out insights about what a digital tool, in that case, we didn't know what it was going to be yet, what should that tool do in order to help them manage that care. And so it really starts with this process of interviewing and understanding these parents. And on the left here, you see something that's called an affinity diagram, which is just a fancy phrase for putting all your ideas on a big board and then kind of synthesizing and summarizing and sort of leveling up the ideas of what people are saying into themes that you can actually design for. So these are things like stress-inducing, sort of understanding that people are doing a lot of self-research. They want a process that's really easy. So that all of those themes bubble up and turn into features that you're actually going to build for a mobile app. The next step along that process, so now we have some themes, we have some ideas, is creating prototypes or mock-ups. And in the parlance of mobile app, this is a wireframe. And it just means this is an example of what the screen might look like. And you build these very iteratively, very quickly, using a number of different tools. And so you build them, and they're just design files. They're just images on a screen, and you can discuss them and sort of create them quickly and understand them. And so you do all of this before you actually do any development, because it's a lot easier to change an image on a screen than to change it in a mobile app itself. That's the second step. So the team built a number of these wireframes for this app called Hometown. And then you actually do the development. So after we had these wireframes, we created, with our partners at GTRI, both an Android and an iOS version of this mobile app, which we call Hometown. And I should mention it's called Hometown because it takes a whole, sort of the whole home to care for these children. It took many different people to manage the scheduling, to manage all the contacts and all the details for these children. And at this stage, we have a working prototype, what we call a minimum viable product, or an MVP. And now we can take it back to the family. So you'll notice this is actually the same family that we interviewed previously. And so now we can get them to download the app on their phone. We can have them go through this process. And now we're touching back with them, just as we did in that human-centered design diagram. We're reaching back to that initial user to get their feedback. And so we were trying to understand what we had built was working for them, what was not working for them, were there big issues that we hadn't considered. And actually something interesting that came out of this interview is that insurance is a huge issue, and these families are actually timing insurance and timing appointments so that they fit within their 1-year cap, which we had not designed for, and we learned in this interview actually. So that's the actual development. I will pause there just for a second. Anyone have questions on all this app development process? All right.
Morgan,
Yeah.
looks like there's a question in the chat.
There's a question.
Yeah. So the question is, can you say something about how to get funding for an app? Specifically, what is innovative about an app? Is it something unique about the data collection in real time, or the app itself affecting a change or improvement of an outcome? What else can be innovative about an app? And you have 10 seconds to answer that. No, I'm kidding. There's a lot to unpack there.
There is a lot to unpack there. So let's actually tackle the funding first, because that's actually my very next slide. How convenient. I'm going to use an example that we're working on, and this is a different mobile app project called Her Heart. And I want to use this example to explain how you can get funding. It started with a research idea. So Dr. Holly Gooding, she works on cardiovascular risk for African-American teens. And specifically, she's working on this problem of teen invincibles, teens that are unaware that their habits are causing them heart problems and will cause heart problems over their life. So she wanted to build a mobile tool that would be engaging for these young people and would help them understand their risk and how their behaviors affect their risk. So she came to us. Maren actually held a design strategy session with her to understand how she wanted to create this project and the types of users that she was designing for. Dr. Gooding then put the App Hatchery in an R03 grant. And so she put budget in that grant for development. And that grant was scored incredibly well and has actually now been granted. And we've started to work on this project. So we're now in the design and development phase where we're providing this design and sort of program management aspect in kind, as I mentioned, provided by the NIH, where the grant funding is going to support the actual software development and the code development for this mobile app that is yet to be designed. We're working on this right now. And then finally, it'll go to the research study. So this is one mechanism that we've seen be successful for funding. Another mechanism I'll get to later is we do have a grant, a pilot grant that we are running right now as the App Hatchery, along with the Pediatric Technology Center. And there's also funds within the university system. There's the I3 Venture Awards. There are multiple ways that you can get funding for these types of projects.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Mm-hmm.
So I was the one who asked that. So relative to specifically this topic, right? So I'm trying to think, like, from a funding agency's perspective. I mean, some of the things that I've heard is, just putting an app, right, in your proposal, that is no longer considered innovative, right? Like, I mean, at one level, I guess so, play devil's advocate. Somebody could say, oh, well, what's different between just having these teens go to a website and type in some stuff, and there's all kinds of online calculators, right, for cardiovascular risk. So specifically, like, kind of what was this PI's innovative piece? Was it something that was unique to teens and how they interact in the world? Like, obviously, my son lives on his phone, that kind of thing, right? So I'm just trying to figure out, like, where's the sweet spot to sort of the selling points for these things? Because it has to be more than just a web page on a phone.
Well, absolutely. Now, I'll take that one on. Okay. Having played this game, so Melinda, probably about 20 times, where you're right. So having just an app in and of itself is not innovative, because there are so many of these things that can be downloaded already. So to your point, it really ultimately is about what the funding agency is looking for. So in this case, Dr. Gooding, when Holly submitted this grant, she actually needed our help to help craft this. And it was specifically choosing a very kind of niche problem area, which is, in this case, teens were unaware and completely unaware of their, specifically with her demographic that she's dealing with, that she's caring for, they were unaware of their cardiovascular risk. Yes, of course, you can download something that might be similar, but the shtick here was that we would help her design. And again, what Morgan and what Maren does quite very well within our own App Hatchery is to figure out exactly what it is that patient population really specifically needs. So in some ways, it's what the private sector calls customer discovery. And that's what we did. And that actually, it worked out very well. I mean, it doesn't always work, but Dr. Gooding actually got a perfect score on her R03, of which the grant, actually, the funding agency and the reviewer said, this app is awesome, right? If you guys can build this, we think it could change the paradigm of how these patients are treated. So this is meant for enabling adolescent medicine physicians to help introduce the topic of cardiovascular disease in certain at-risk demographics. So it goes back to, if we're talking about NIH, Melinda, what NIH defines as innovation, right? How is this tool a paradigm shifting tool with the specific clinical scenario in mind. So it's no different than any other aspect of innovation. You have to show that this app, which in theory, right, is not too complex to make. And Morgan and I will touch on that a little bit. You know, what seems simple sometimes isn't.
I'm thinking like that may be an area where with some of our researchers and stuff, I think if they connect with you guys, they can look at getting, right, like some of this focus group type information. I mean, even with maybe just some tiny, almost internal pilot, you know, dollars just to be able to, you know, do some of this piece to say, how is it going to be a paradigm shift? Because you've got to have that language to sell the funding.
And we would agree with you 100%. In fact, you know, Morgan, we can talk about how for many of our colleagues who've come up to us and said, oh, I got this great idea for an app, can you help us? I mean, we're at the point now where we actually have to start turning people away a little bit. And part of our own triage process is, like you would imagine, we go up to the App Store too and say, did you even do a search on you know, Google Play to find out that, you know, this thing that you're talking about, there's like already 5 versions of this. We dig into it a little bit deeper to see if there's a more specific need. But like you said, it really is about what is the impact that this specific project can make for this specific patient population in mind.
Yeah, and if I could add something, so I'm actually working on this project right now, and what's interesting within sort of, you know, design thinking, methodology and process, you know, it's very iterative, right? We keep going back, we optimize, and there is a question right now: is a mobile app the best solution, or should it be some digital tool on a tablet in the clinic? Right? We have a captive audience. Maybe it would be better to have them fill out, you know, information on a tablet in the office. And so right now we're working through the details of that. So again, you know, I think starting off, understanding what the need set is, interviewing, you know, your either your patient group or whatever your user group is going to be, to understand sort of their underlying needs, and then being flexible enough to iterate around that to really optimize to meet their specific need is really what design thinking methodology is about. Because the last thing you want to do is spend a tremendous amount of time, money, and resources developing something that nobody is going to use.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen. So to kind of at least wrap up this part of the Q&A, which is an important one, of funding, one thing that we found is very helpful is basically writing grants with you, right? Which we could do some preliminary interviewing to help you guys figure out exactly what problem can be solved with an app. And we could do this kind of groundwork in the beginning. You guys could actually incorporate what we do within the app, within the grant, excuse me. And it could be a win-win because, you know, as Morgan alluded to, the development of this stuff is actually not cheap. So what Dr. Gooding did is actually included our services as part of her grant. So basically co-grant writing with you all is one potential avenue. Obviously, you know, there's no guarantee you'll get a grant, and a granting timeline is obviously, you know, a long game process, right? From start to finish, as you all know, with NIH, submission of a grant to best case scenario, if you get funded, can be a year. So it's really thinking with that timeline in mind. So Morgan, we'll turn it back over to you, unless you think we didn't answer any.
There's one sort of follow up here, which is about how long this process takes. And actually 2 things I want to say. One is in Dr. Gooding's grant, it doesn't say mobile app anywhere. It just says digital tool. So it's the, you know, as people are approaching these, I wouldn't get stuck on the idea of a mobile app. This discovery process can lead you to different kinds of technical solutions. And then one question was about how long does this process take? And I'll be honest that most of these apps take quite a long time to create. This Her Heart project has been going on over a year. The Hometown project that we just mentioned has been going on for a year and a half. And it, a lot of that time is waiting. So a lot of it is not active development, I'll be honest. The actual active development part can be relatively short, something on the order of 2 to 3 months for these projects. But there's that iterative process does take time. And I wanted to be clear about that. And then the question about CTSA charging for the services, I would say come talk to me. We don't have like a set rate card for these kinds of things because it's different for every single project. So it's something that we would create sort of bespoke.
Right. We're not a core, so to speak. We're here to help, and I think, as Morgan kind of said, we take everything on a case-by-case basis. Some projects already had funding built in. Some projects have zero funding, which is more typical, and some are somewhere in between. So yeah, come talk to us.
Yeah.
But we do like it if you come with funding, especially.
we do not mind. We do not mind.
We do not mind. But many projects we work on also do not have funding. So it's both. So as I mentioned, our support does range. So we have some projects like a project called Serve, where we're providing everything. So we did the design, we did the development. We're actually helping with the recruitment for this particular app. And this is working on post-surgery recovery at Grady as patients come out of trauma surgery and they come back to the trauma clinic. So that's sort of full end-to-end, and there was some funding attached to that project. Versus another project, which was called TIME, Trauma-Informed Medicine Education, where an investigator had a mobile app already and just wanted help assessing what she had and understanding the design and the limitations of that design. So we helped her with that sort of small piece of the development. And so we have a number of different projects that range between simple consultation. Some of these, all we've done is help co-write the grant, as Wilbur mentioned, and some of them we're actually helping sort of end to end. And I'll just touch on one question from earlier. I forgot the name of the person who asked, but there's kind of two kinds of digital app interventions. There's these simple versions where it's a lot about patient education and a lot about sort of patient engagement. So many apps that we see and many requests we see have that kind of style. And then there's another kind of app altogether, which is where the app is the intervention. It's much more direct and much deeper from a technology standpoint. So one app that we're working on related to that is called Hamlet in the lower right here. This is actually using cameras to measure the tuberculin skin response for tuberculosis tests, for TB tests. And so that's a much more direct use of mobile app technology. So there's really sort of two kinds as you think about different ideas. And as I mentioned, we do have a seed grant open. It's a $50,000 seed grant that's jointly run by the App Hatchery and by the Pediatric Technology Center. It does have to have something to do with pediatrics, but you can scan this little QR code or go to this website. We can distribute these slides afterward. And that is due July 16th if you're interested in applying for that. And if you do have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, sort of preview what that kind of process looks like.
I would like to bring up one other thing, which is Epic, right? We're doing this huge migration to Epic, and one of the projects that we've been working on has been to help support patients through all of the different steps pre-bariatric surgery. And we were looking at patient engagement platforms. We did an analysis of the patient journey. This was all sort of in this early design strategy portion, discovery of the project. And we had evaluated, I think there were 6 different platforms, and then looked at functionality that Epic provided. And so we had the option of trying to do a pilot. So the App Hatchery doesn't necessarily create all of the digital tools. There are tools that we can look at, negotiating and bringing in as platforms for these projects. But what happened is that Epic ended up having a lot of the functionality that the patients needed and also the support staff needed in order to get these patients through their patient journey to get them to the surgery. And so we may be seeing more opportunities for developing tools that integrate more directly with Epic, or actually have that functionality within Epic itself.
Yeah. So that's it for App Hatchery. I'm going to move on to some of the other services that we offer. And the first is just a lecture series. So if you have questions, this is all around commercialization. So we offer a 10 lecture series. It's one per month, and it's called the Bench to Market Talks. And the last one just ended, but they're all recorded and they're on YouTube. You can find them, or we can put the link in chat afterwards. And each talk is focused on a specific category. So you can see some of them here. I blocked them with the picture, unfortunately. So if you have questions about IP strategy, about forming a team, about SBIR funding, we have a talk for each of these different commercialization categories, which are open to anyone to attend. The next is a program that we call Innovation Trailhead. And this is really focused on the investigator, or group of investigators who don't really know how to get started. And they have this idea, they have they think they have a technology or a platform, and they think there's something there, but they don't know really how to start on this commercialization journey. And so that's where we can help. And it starts with creation of what we call a business concept, where we just ask you some tough questions about, how big we think your market is, who you think your customers are going to be, how are you going to find those customers, how are you going to sell to them, how are you going to distribute to them, what are your risks with your different technology. And then we'll do some training on what's called customer discovery. And this is a very common type of training, but it's really aimed at for the person who's really just starting out on the commercialization journey. And then we'll give you some homework to go out and try to understand the market and the customer for whatever commercialization venture that you're trying to go on. And then from there, we have a number of different next steps that you can take, and we'll recommend these to you, whether it's I-Corps, whether it's applying for SBIR, STTR funding, whether going to Kauffman Fast Track, which Wilbur mentioned at the top. And so if you don't really know how to get started, we can help you sort of get going on your commercialization journey.
Thanks, Morgan. So I'll just add and augment to that. So this applies to any biomedical innovation. And what we found is that there's a need here within our Emory ecosystem, because there are some existing mechanisms that can help investigators who have kind of more mature technologies that have already kind of moved through several stages of proof of concept. For example, the Biolocity program, which you might have heard about, which is their goal is to actually fund and accelerate novel biomedical innovations. But by definition, those are already kind of beyond a few steps than what many investigators are, which is really at step 0, which is, well, I have an idea, or maybe I just published a paper, or maybe I'm starting to make this discovery in my own laboratory, in my own research group. Is there any commercialization potential for that, for my discovery, for my invention? And here's where we can help. We can help you answer that question and help you decide to move forward, if at all. So it's really meant for true early stage inventions and biomedical innovations.
Yeah, thanks, Wilbur. The next is SBIR and STTR support under the heading of Biz Grants. And these, if you're not familiar with these acronyms, these are two very prominent programs that fund innovation that primarily, not exclusively, but primarily comes out of academic institutions. And these are specifically non-dilutive funds, so essentially grants for academic research to be commercialized and to be turned into what the government calls a small business concern, and to be put out into the world. It's the government's attempt to get the things that they fund within universities out to actual customers. And what Wilbur has collected is a group of faculty and other staff within our 4 partner CTSA institutions who've previously won SBIR or STTR awards. And what we do is we'll match you with one of these investigators, and they'll do a peer review with you. So basically, if you have a grant that is half written or you need some advice on how to get started, they will provide a peer service. You still have to write most of it, but they will help you and guide you in that process. And then we do also have an expert consultation, which is just getting off the ground, so I won't mention too much more about that. And then we'll also help actually submit the SBIR and STTR. And then the final thing is we are going to hold a specific grant writing workshop later in the year. I think it's in November is when it's scheduled. And you can look out for that if you want to attend and learn more about that in a much more rigorous way.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Morgan. So I'll add a couple of things. So those of you who aren't familiar with these grant mechanisms, SBIR, STTR, they're all funded by federal agencies, including the NIH. In fact, the NIH IC that many of you all likely are involved with or applied to is the NINR, and they are certainly one of the ICs within the NIH that funds SBIRs, STTRs. Now, the one thing about these grants is you do need to have a collaborative or collaboration with a company, and sometimes these companies are formed specifically just to apply for SBIRs, STTRs, and we can even help you with those questions as well and help you with those strategies. One thing about these grants is that the pay lines tend to be a little bit better than typical R grants. So I've experienced this myself. All of my grants go through the NHLBI of the NIH. And the difference between a pay line for an SBIR, especially an early phase one, compared to a typical R1 grant is like several times. So it's very interesting. Congress always has bipartisan support for these types of grants. So it's one of those rare times that actually occurs. So there's always things that are worth thinking about as an investigator who may have some type of idea related to innovation.
Awesome.
Thanks, Morgan. Go ahead.
And last but not least, if you do not know where to start on regulatory approval, we have a program called Reg Roadmap, and it starts with, it's a self-fulfilled, we have a video series that you can watch, and it will guide you in the creation of a regulatory strategy for your technology. And in particular, it dives into the 510K, the FDA's 510K pathway, which is an incredibly common regulatory pathway. And even specifically within that, we talk about healthcare IT or digital health types of technologies and how those get regulatory approval, which is a changing target over the last few years. So if you're curious about that, you can watch those videos on our website. And then if you do end up creating a regulatory strategy and you want some additional consultation, we can provide that. And you can come and talk to us about your strategy. We can give you guidance based on our own experience. And if you need specific IND and IDE support or submissions to the FDA, and if you need those, you need those, then we refer you over to the experts over in our sister organization within the CTSA, called Regulatory Knowledge and Support, which is RKS. And that is it for our presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Morgan. So it looks like there's a question in the chat about, can we provide help with hiring a programmer for a project? Oh boy,
that's an interesting question. Yes, we do not know any specific programmers. There are the programmers that we hire tend to be Georgia Tech graduate students. And if you want to unmute, actually, we can probably help you live.
Yeah, I think that question came from Andy.
Andy Plotsky.
Yeah, is there any any specific question regarding hiring a programmer, one thing we are facing right now is these developers, and this is even from my own personal experience with my own startup companies. Developers are actually very hard to hire right now, especially in this economy where they're in very high demand, as many people who are trying to hire are attesting to. But in this space specifically, they're pretty hard. But yeah, in general, so Morgan, we do have an ecosystem where we do have access to programmers. They're not cheap. A lot of times if we want professional programmers, we work with GTRI, especially if we have some funding in place. For example, using CTSA funds, sometimes we're able to use our partners over at Georgia Tech. Our quote unquote cheaper and more common processes to leverage graduate students at Georgia Tech. And that also kind of fulfills our mission within the CTSA to help educate and train as well. And they also happen to be cheaper, much like other grad students tend to be. And we've even entertained the possibility of going outside with getting professional developers, and they're not cheap. We have some creative strategies. So I guess the bottom line is, depending on what your specific question is, we might be able to help. And I think it just depends on what you need, but feel free to reach out to Morgan or myself.
Yeah.
So I know people are worried about having to have funding to come to the CTSA, but I think we should not let that hold us up or, be a barrier, and just, have some discussion about how that might work.
Yes, I should be clear that consultation with us is free. It just costs your time. That's it. And you can come to talk to us, and we've found multiple creative solutions to fund projects within the academic ecosystem. So we're more than willing to chat with you and help you.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
All right.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sandra, for having us.
Well, this was really, really helpful, and thank you so much for all of your great information. And we will definitely, we will have the recording for our innovation strategic planning team. So I'm sure you'll be hearing back from faculty from time to time soon. So thanks to everyone. Thanks for your great questions. And thank you, Wilbur and Morgan, for your leadership in this excellent resource.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.